All right, so just go back to what we're saying is we're going to install Derby today. Big thing. But we're also going to talk about JDBC. In fact, I'm going to start talking about JDBC first because how do we test that the database connection and all that is good? We actually use JDBC to do so. That's how we connect our our code to the database. So it's important to do that. But we'll also spend some time just playing with the database today as well. We won't be adding a bunch of data. We'll just be playing with it. So let's get this party started. So we're going to talk about JDBC first, and then we're going to install Derby. When you install Derby, it's installed. It doesn't need to be reinstalled every time, blah, 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 right? Which is great. But if you try to remove it for whatever reason, like maybe you did it wrong, you can't remove it. You'll find pretty quickly that you can't remove it. You can change its installation, but you can't actually remove it. So the way to remove Derby, of course, is to delete NetBeans completely. And that'll solve the problem. However, that takes some time. That's what I did this morning. So yay. But let's talk about JDBC. First of all, we need to talk about what it is. But just quick idea of JDBC is it's the tool framework that allows us to access databases. That's it. It allows our code to access the database. We introduced and discussed JDBC in terms of purpose, use, and overall architecture. It's really simple. For what we need in this course, remember, we're going to eventually use Java's persistent architecture. So we're going to use a completely different framework. But in order to get our first couple of homeworks under our belts, we really need to talk about JDBC. I think by the time we get our second homework, we will have JPA under our belts. But how do we, we're going to connect to a database and do some basic things like that with a database. We need to actually connect to JDBC to do so. So your first homework will be JDBC. I'll probably give it Wednesday, not today. Not by probably, it's definitely on the syllabus as being given Wednesday. But anyway, that's what we're going to be doing. We'll discuss the mechanism used by JDBC to connect an application to a database, explain the typical procedure involved when using a database, and discuss the execution of commands and queries. So we talked about some SQL queries. I know we went really quickly, but we talked about how do we create a database. We talked about how do we insert things into a database, how do we update things in a database, how do we query things in a database, and how do we delete databases, right? We did all those things. Nothing here is new, right? It's all just how do we make this happen in our application code. So almost all of that is still the same SQL stuff. It's just a matter of how do you put the SQL into the code, right? And so most of that is what we call execution, command, and queries. A command, of course, is something you tell something to do. And a query is where you ask for information. So as an example, if I asked you how much money you have in your pocket, I don't want to know, so don't tell me. But that's a query. I'm expecting an answer. A command is jump. Then you jump, right? I don't need a response to that. And that's kind of how that goes, right? It's pretty simple. JDBC is actually pretty simple. The hard part, 100% of the hard part we're going to do today. 90% of you will not have issues with the code itself once you get past the connection. It's actually understanding how to connect to it. That's the hard part. So I think we'll be fine there. And then, of course, using the database appropriately is also important. All right. JDBC is Java database connectivity. So the J is Java, DB is database, and C is connectivity. So it's really an API that allows Java programs to connect databases. What's really cool about Java is Java's JDBC is an intermediary between the code and database systems. Now, wait, what? So what that means is we have uniform access. We use the JDBC, and all Java code, all of it, if it wants to connect to a database, uses the JDBC to do so. Anywhere from connection pooling to all the things that we might want to do with a database, from transactions and those type of things, they can all be handled through JDBC, right? And so This really simplifies code. Like if you want to go from one database to another in another language, you actually have to use sometimes a different code base, right? So you have to change a lot of things. The JDBC, all you have to change is the driver and the connection to that driver, and then you're done. And so it's a lot easier to use. The JVM uses a database vendor provided driver to translate generalized JDBC calls into vendor specific database calls. So it makes it very, very, very easy to use. We just need to worry about this database. We need to have access to a database vendor provided JDBC driver. Okay, so this is one class that you probably didn't want to skip, by the way. We're going to talk about this later, but essentially there are some errors in the slides, and we'll talk about where and what they are, especially as we do the actual code. Anyway, the driver details, the Java application needs connected to the database. The database is at the bottom, but the database can only be accessed using a vendor-specific API. So something has to sit in the middle. Wait, what? Something has to sit in the middle, right? And so that's where the JDBC comes in. The JDBC API, that's what you as a Java developer would use to connect to the database. It's pretty simple from there. But the thing is about that is it actually has to translate your calls, your queries, your commands, all the things you want to do with the database to the vendor-specific API. And so a vendor-specific driver has to be involved. Typically, that's just a quick import. And you'll see us do that throughout the code. I believe that's where things change a little bit, where in the past you actually had to specify which class you wanted to use, the vendor specific driver. Nowadays, it just assumes, right? I love assumes, right? It makes an ass out of you and me. But the assumption is that it can find it, and it finds the first one it can use. I don't love that, and we'll talk about why I don't love that when we do the code. But the short answer is that we don't need to do everything that you're going to see. We can actually simplify it quite a bit. But the Java API, the Java application has to connect to a database, and it uses JDBC to do so. The only piece you need to worry about is the JDBC driver manager, and it does all the work that you're going to need. Common set of actions. So what do you mean common set of actions, right? What do we do? Well, first we have to load the database driver. Gotta do that before you do anything else. Then you create a connection to the server. Then you do things with the server, and then you close the connection to the server. So I know this isn't important, but it is. Okay. You may not realize this, but one of the things you see with the database is it is an application server. It is a network-based server that is going to communicate, over an API, but it's going to communicate over a network, right? You're going to have port numbers, and you're going to have to see all these things, and you're like, what the hell is all this, right? It's actually connecting to a server, the database server, in order to do its work. Now with Derby is going to be automatically, like, you're going to run it, and it'll be running based in NetBeans, right? It's pure Java implementation of a database. We'll talk about it in more detail later on. But if this was an Oracle server, you just provide different connection details. I mean, really, that's it. But it is actually a server. And as a result of being a server, this is why this is easy to remember. You load the database driver and like making a call, right? I'm going to call McDonald's and tell them I want a Big Mac, large fries, and a sweet tea, right? So what do I got to do first? I got to establish a connection to McDonald's. Then I'm going to ask my queries. They're going to, do all the things I need to do. And then I'm going to close the call, right? That's how that works. It's a server. It's how that works. Do not forget that you need to do those 3 steps. We'll talk about loading the database driver. That we should get to today, because that's like I said, the hard part of using JDBC is not actually the creating connections to a server or closing a connection to a server, or even performing the actions or queries that you need to perform. 90% of it is actually loading the database driver. That's the part that causes any consternation that would happen. And it is simpler now than it used to be, which is great. Everything's simpler now, right? Not really, but we'll talk about it. So the purpose of the driver manager class in the JDBC is to provide a common access layer for various databases. The driver manager requires that all drivers be registered prior to use. This means you have to use it This means you have to load the driver using the class loader. Yes, that sentence does not make sense. This means loading the driver using the class loader. Class.forName, and then you give it the name, and then you create a new instance. We don't need to do this anymore. We'll talk about this when we actually do the code. You might still see me do it, but we really don't need to do it. We'll talk about it later. Connecting to it, once you have the driver, then we create a connection.con, and then we specify driver.getConnection, and then we give it a URL. We'll talk more about this URL in a minute. And then it has a username and password. The URL, like http:/, right? The protocol is JDBC:/Derby. If this was Oracle, this would be Oracle, right? And then / and then you give it a location. You're always going to use localhost. After your first homework, you guys are going to have a database using your name. This is the name of the database. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you're all going to use your last name and the database. That's part of homework 1. And so you're always going to / this sort of URL, right? JDBC Derby, that indicates that we're going to use the Derby. We're using JDBC. Which type of database we're using? We're using the Derby. / localhost. Port number 1527. This is the actual server address for Derby, right? It'll be running in NetBeans, but this is server address. We'll encounter some problems there. When this is not running, it'll say, hey, connection denied, blah, blah, blah. But that's because it's trying to connect to a remote server, which happens to be localhost rather than an actual URL. And then finally, you see a / at the end. This is actually the name of the database. In this case, it's CST 367X example. We'll talk about how to create these and use these connections as well. All of your code that you're going to turn into me needs to use your last name. I don't believe there's any name conflicts between any of you. So you just use your last name, all lowercase, excuse me, and then your username and password should be also your name, all lowercase as well. But my user and my password, these are the username and password. Remember, you'd have to connect to a server, and the server has a username and password associated with it. Boom. So as an example down below, this is a connection using Oracle. Oracle has multiple types of drivers, unfortunately, but the simple one we use most frequently when we're doing JDBC type work, the one I've used in the past, is Oracle, and then you see there's a thin. This indicates that it's JDBC, it's an Oracle JDBC, but we're going to use the thin client rather than the thick one. Certain types of servers would use the thick one, and I say thick one, it's just the regular one. And then instead of the // it uses an @ symbol at localhost 1521, and then instead of a / it uses the name of the database, right? And you go, why is it different, right? This is JDBC, right? Because the databases are different, and their vendors can specify their own things, and that works out great for them. So just be aware. We're only going to accept code in Derby, so don't try to use anything other than Derby at any point. You literally won't get credit for it. So make sure you use Derby at all times. It's just simpler. One thing I'm going to point out though, code wise, if I change this one line to this line, I'm connected to a Oracle server rather than a Derby server. And that would be more like what you experience in production. But that's how that works. When you go from production to test to production, test is where the environment in which you're going to just run your code to see if it works and make sure it works before it goes live and customers see it. That's production. So we might run it locally on Derby, make sure everything works great, and then switch the con to the actual system and then put it in production, right? Deploy it on an actual server. That's how simple it is to actually deploy. JDBC is really beneficial in that regard. We don't have to rewrite a whole part of the application. We don't have to mimic production in the way in our test environments in the same way. It makes a lot of things easier. for testing purposes, for development purposes. All right, so perform actions. It's usually a two-step process. Once we're connected, it's usually a two-step process. We create a statement. Statement equals con.create statement. Generally speaking, there are two types of SQL commands. We have actions, execute or execute update. No real result is returned on execute or execute update. However, we might want a quantity. So one of these might return, there's situations where execute update could return a number, could return a count of the number of things it updated, as an example. So just be aware of that. Execute update is different from execute. Execute, I believe, returns void, and execute update returns a number. We'll play with these in more detail tomorrow, not tomorrow, Wednesday. We just want to talk about them today just so we can do it. And then query is going to execute query. It's going to actually return a result object. And this means that we actually go through the object and do stuff with the object. Yay. So let's do creating a table as an example. We can have drop table as well. String SQL, create table schools, SCID integer, school ID, right? Name varchar, primary key SCID, close parentheses, and then con.create statement.execute. And I just put the SQL string in there and execute it. You know, I'm not looking for a response. If something goes wrong with this, like the table already exists as an example, it will throw an exception. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we do the code. But for the most part, this is really simple to execute these commands. Dropping the table, con.create statement.execute. We can just put the string directly in. We did the string creating the table because creating table is a longer thing. And what I'll do a lot of times is I'll actually create the query or create the command in Notepad, and then I'll literally just copy it in to NetBeans and then add the things that make it a Java statement. Why do I do that? It's just easier, right? Because that way I know the problem is with the code versus the problem with the SQL statement. We'll see that when we actually execute things Wednesday. We're going to create a school. I think we create a school database or an employee database. I don't remember in our code during the demo. That's what we do. And then we'll insert a lot of things when we do that. Again, you might want to know how many rows are added or updated with the updates or inserts, right? Now, with the inserts, we can just do it this way, right? We just create the string, boom, execute it, done. But we have to do so one at a time. But with an update, it doesn't work that way, right? Remember I told you, update table school, set name equals Roosevelt, where name equals RU. Well, in that case, how many things should actually change, right? If we assume this schema, the name is a varchar, right? So what could happen here? What if I had multiple schools named RU, for example? What happens then is I'd have multiple results, right? This rows would be more than one. If Roosevelt was if there was only one Roosevelt, this should only be one. So knowing the number of rows is actually relatively important, okay? So on an update. So we want to know. So we can do that. When we execute update, we actually get the rows back. This command probably should only affect one row, but it could affect several rows. Remember, if you leave off the where name equals RU, every school in that table, every record in that table is going to have its names changed to Roosevelt. We're going to see some examples of that as we go along. I'll do some common error type stuff on Wednesday. So you'll get to see a chance to do that. All right, so executing queries. This is actually really important and really weird. So this is the one, like I told you, once you get a handle on this object result set, executing queries are not difficult. Once you get a handle on what this result set actually is, it's actually pretty simple. But a result set object holds a result of all queries you made using the JDBC. The syntax of a JDBC query is as follows. Result set equals con.create statement.execute query. Select star from student. So that's going to select all the rows from the student array, from the student table. But a result set is an object. It's essentially a data structure. And what's in the data structure? Right? Like a table, right? A table is a series of rows. So a result set is no different. It's a set of rows. What is also a table? A table is a set of rows with column information, columnar information. So while you're in a row, you're going to be able to identify the you're going to be able to move from row to row, right? You can go to a specified record. So if you want to go result set and you want to go to the third result in the result set, you can do so using the absolute result set dot absolute, right? And specify the integer. But most of what we do is next, right? We do something with the record and then we move to the next record. We're going to see me do that a lot. How do we access fields? We can use the index of the column or the name of the field. I'm going to do it two ways when you see me do the example. What I do typically is, apologize, I use that bottom one, rs.getInt SCID, right? I know since I'm developing the system, I know what my going too far. I know what my database is supposed to look like. I know what the fields are. I know what the names of the fields are and so forth. So I'm just going to use those in the query. If I need an integer, I use getInt. If I need a string, I use getString, and there's a whole bunch of them. We'll see them when we actually do the code. But if I don't know what record I'm looking at, which should never literally happen, or I use a specialized version of select statement where I select asterisk dot. Instead of asterisk, I select the names of the columns as an example. I might use rs.getString or getInt, whatever, with a number, and that's going to be the column number. Now, bad news, and you'll see me do it in real life, there is no zero. Wait, what? So typically in array in Java, in almost every data structure you use in Java, the arrays, everything starts at 0. In database result sets, they do not. They start at 1. They start at the first row, not at row 0. So remember that. That's going to be weird, but usually creates a quick error, so it's not usually that big a deal. But here's a larger example. Select rs for select star from students. This is that query we had earlier. rs.next. I just do a while loop, so I'm going to loop through all the array, all the elements. System out print 9, I name rs.getString name. System out print, I print out a space, and then I print out a GPA. And here I have rs.getDouble GPA. And these are the names of those columns. And so that's why that works. And it just prints out the name and GPA for each student in my table. We'll see lots of examples of this. But the most important thing is if you keep it simple, this is actually quite simple. rs.next, when you try to go to when you get to the last row and you try to go next, it returns false, which is why this while loop works the way it does. Also, because of the way it works, the way it does, rs.next gets called at first, and so it goes to that first element. So this would actually print out all the rows in the result set. All right. Now, you got queries and commands. We've already done it. The only questionable piece is actually running it in the code. So we have a lot to do in terms of getting Derby installed, and we're going to play with Derby a little bit. I'm going to kind of start with the code today, but not really. My main job is to get Derby installed, show you how to do that. That's really important. You're all going to want to do that before your homework starts. You're all going to want to do it before your homework starts, because when the homework's due, the homework is due. Okay. It's not, it's too late to install Derby after the homework's due. So, that's really important. We need to get Derby installed. And then we need a way, I like to say, we're going to do what we call sanity tests. Now, I know many of you might not think I'm that sane. I don't think I'm that sane either. But what I was going to say is that a sanity check is just something to verify that it is in fact working. When we have things that depend on other things, oftentimes we do sanity checks to make sure it's not, so in other words, Derby's installed correctly, and it's not that preventing your query from going through, right? You know, you get a lot of buildup, right? You have to install NetBeans, you have to install Derby, then we have to install the code to get Derby to run. Then we have to install the libraries for it and so forth. There's a lot of ways in which this could go sideways. Not really. Most of you will have zero problems with this, but what I was going to say is that there are a lot of ways that go sideways. But when you're executing this query, what went wrong? Is the query wrong? Right? Did you use the wrong table name? Did you use the wrong select group? Whatever. Did you use the wrong query? Right? You have those issues, but it could just be that your Derby database isn't installed correctly, or what you call it. So we do sanity checks to make sure that those things are done, and I recommend doing them as well. Also, I recommend installing all this before your homework's due. It's really important. Introduce and discuss the Java JDBC in terms of purpose, use, and overall architecture. We're going to use it to connect to a database to do what I call maintenance things, right? We're going to run code periodically that's going to create tables, maybe populate them with the random data. That's what we're going to do tomorrow, not tomorrow, Wednesday. And so that's the kind of thing we're going to do with JDBC. Most of our actual finished product, when you get to your project, your final project, most of that will actually be using the Java persistence architecture built into the systems that we use. But JDBC is how you would use, if you had to connect to any application in Java to a database, you're going to use JDBC. So it's important to know. We are not going to go into all the things you can do with JDBC because we don't need to. Java persistent architecture, as an example, allows for connection pooling to a level that would be very difficult to do in JDBC, right? We don't have to worry about threads. We don't have to worry about this. We don't have to worry about that. And we do with JDBC. So Java persistent architecture is going to solve a lot of problems for us. But we do need to use JDBC a little bit just so we can understand how it works. Yeah, so we talked about typical procedure. Load the database driver, connect, do your work, disconnect. We didn't show it, but con.close is how we disconnect this server. Discuss the execution of commands and queries. There are only two things to do. We have execute and execute update. Execute update may return numbers. Then we have a query, execute query. Execute query returns a result set, which we can then parse to determine our data within the query. Quick point about that, I just want to add, keep it simple. There should be nothing special about it. The stuff that you can do for homework 1, the stuff you do for the final project, as it relates to the database SQL query type stuff you would do, isn't going to be very different. So you should be able to keep it pretty simple and still be very successful in this class. So just throw that out there. All right, for more informations, there's a couple of things to look out for. SQL, there's a tutorial on W3 Schools. If you need help, let me know. Your SQL skills are not being tested, right? Like if you have problems with a query, you can let me know and we'll talk it through. Usually nobody presents any SQL problems until the very end of the semester usually. And that's just because they didn't try to do their work until the very end of the semester, which is not always great. The JDBC tutorial is available. I don't recommend using it. Keep it simple. The JDBC tutorial is built for applications that are going to use like the whole power of JDBC. We are not going to need to do that. We are just going to use JDBC to connect to a single threaded system a single threaded application is going to connect to the database, do some stuff, disconnect from the database. It's not, we don't need to go to the same level, but if you Google tutorials, it's available. There's also a NetBeans tutorial, which I don't recommend. Talk about that later. I have one that is I have a link in this week that is posted today. I posted it today. That's much better. And we'll talk about it. I have it online. I have it on the in Chrome right now. So we'll talk about it in just a second. But having said that, let's move along. All right. So you may have questions. I would like you to hold off. I'll be installing things. And as a result of being installing, if you have questions, please wait till I'm installing something. Okay. So I had downloaded the most recent version of NetBeans today because unfortunately, you can't disconnect from the database. So you see start server, stop server, properties. I can click on properties, right? And then I go to the Java database installation, right? And you go, wait, what is that? You go, huh, well, I just downloaded it, so it's not installed anywhere. So first thing first, I'm gonna extract it, right? And you're like, wait, why did I extract it before showing you where it is? Very simple. Extracting it obviously takes a second, so I wanted to show you where it is after the fact. I'll make a link to this, but if you just Google Derby database, you're going to get db.apache.org/Derby. That's it. It is Apache product now. It is not an Oracle product. It used to be an Oracle product, which is why you get things like this. It says, how do we connect to it, right? And they're, you know, you can download it separately, but this link is dead because it actually goes to Oracle, which is not the proper place. And so what do we do? Well, you first go to download and then you figure out which version of Java you have. So I just installed the most recent one, which is Java 18. And so I got the most recent one. I just did. You can use the other ones. That version of Derby you use is not going to make a huge difference to the class. Most of the changes to Derby are, if you look at the actual notes or documentation or whatever, most of the changes are underneath. The things we're going to do are relatively simple enough, and as a result, it won't really matter. So you download it, and you got to unzip it. And yes, it's still unzipping. It's actually quite a large folder. I mean, not that big, but it's large for, I feel like it's large for a Java. I feel like it's large for what it is. So, which is an API or framework. So now I'm going to copy it and I'm going to put it in my documents folder. And the reason for that is I periodically clean out, of course, my I periodically clean out my downloads folder, and I don't want it to stay there. Yay. Now, I'll show you a couple other things that are there. You see I downloaded all the other things, right? But let me show you a couple things that are in here. There's new to Derby using this distribution, release notes, blah, 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 right? There's a website in the actual system. We don't need to look at that at any point. You can see Derby docs. They actually have documentation for it in PDF and so forth, blah, 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 blah. Again, a lot more of this than you need. The bin folder is everything you need, okay? You go, wait, what? I'm going to show you why in just a second. And the library is the other one. So we'll talk about those two in just a second, but let's go ahead. And now that we have it in a folder where I want it to be, I'm going to go ahead and specify it. So I'm going to go documents, Derby. I think I want bin. I don't remember. Nope. It'll tell you it's not valid. I think I just want this guy. Yep. All right. And now it want to install a database location. This is actually easy. You just go browse, and then this is where you want to put it. I highly recommend putting it somewhere where it's going to be relatively safe. I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it my DB. And that's the folder I'm going to put all my databases are going to go in there. Now, how does Derby manage persistence? Really don't care, but it's actually doing a flat files database. It's actually storing things in a file. It loads everything into a file upon starting, loads everything from the file upon starting, and keeps it in memory. But it stores everything permanently there. And then as you can see, I have oops. Oh, yeah. So I can't connect because I don't have a suitable driver. And you go, wait, what? Right? How come I don't have a suitable driver? Very simple. I don't have the library here. So I go to add. Oops, nope. Don't do it that way. Go new library and go DerbyDB, or as an example, whatever. And then I just, because I don't care, like I know like I probably should care, but I'm going to tell you a secret. I don't care. See all these CS, blah, blah, blah. These are all different languages. Just make sure you're installing all the things for Derby. We don't need Derby tools. We don't need Derby client. We don't need CS, the different things. We just don't care. We won't need them. If I left them out, I'm not sure it would change. The tools are Derby run, Derby shared. These are actually, yeah, I can remove these. These are actually, and I can remove Derby Net as well. Derby client and Derby jar are the only ones that matter. And I think Derby client's the only one that really matters. Says can't find a suitable driver. Huh. What am I missing here? I'm missing something obvious. I'm missing something obvious. I'm trying to think, remember what I'm missing. That's right. Tools. Derby. Maybe I do need those other guys. I don't think I do. Let's go ahead and add them. There we go. Oh, that's it. I'm sorry. Click on new driver. And then we click on the driver files, and I'm going to show you where that is. That's pretty simple. Damn it. It's easier than I expected. Client, and then you click find, and then boom, there it is. And just name it something. It should. Nope. Okay, I screwed that up here. All right. The driver class is missing. It's in one of these, unfortunately. Okay. All right. So this is being weird. Let's go ahead and delete it. Delete you. And delete you. Yeah. Add a new driver. Here we go. And I'm just going to add the Derby client and the Derby jar. Shouldn't matter. The only one that matters is the Derby client. Then we click find, and it says auto load a driver, but that's not the one we want. We definitely don't want the IP. Yeah, this is wonky. Let's see. Configuring the database. Registering the database. Did that. Yeah. Yeah, so this is all I need to do. Trying to think of the name of the driver I need to use. I don't know if I need to do this or I might have to come back and do this separately. All right, that is what I'm missing. I can't seem to find, it's not locating the, that's the name I'm looking for. I'm trying to find a pen because it's only gonna pop up for a second. Should have done this before class. However, life is like that, right? Better me have the problem than you have the problem, right? Nope. All right. There we go. Boom. All right. Why are you not happy? All right. So a couple things. Usually we don't have this. So this is where things get a little weird. We don't usually have this issue. And you go, what do you mean? Hmm. All right. At least I copy that to Karen. Find out why I can't figure out the driver. I know. No suitable driver. We don't want the database to create new. That is a good URL. So that's not a problem. All right, but okay. So it's saying it's not a driver, but the hell it isn't. So this is the network part of Derby. We don't really ever need that part. So I'm just wondering, let's add Derby Dar. Don't need this guy. Okay, we'll stick with this. So just so we're aware, typically, and I've done this class about 6 times, typically this, one of the reasons why we use NetBeans to do this, to use Derby, is this is effortless. Once we install the database, there's no like, this is not usual, if you hadn't guessed. So do. I'm gonna add it separate. Okay, and no, don't want that. Oh, somebody coming and going. All right. So thing to remember about, oh, you know what? Great database. Let's go with Michael E. Ruth. That's my name. Actually, my last name. Let's just use my last name. Should always use a password. Yep. We're still having the same problem. Couple of things I can is this too freaking new? Is this one too freaking new? Yeah, so I don't know. But I can tell you what we can do. I can go back to Turby downloads, and I'll just pick the previous one while we're waiting this to do its thing. You just want the bin. I'm using Windows. So unless you're using Linux, just use the bin. It actually is only 20 megabytes, but it's like pretty big for what it is. And I'm going to tell you really bluntly, this should never take this much work. 99% of the time, you just register it. And then you set up the addresses and then you're done. So now I'm really like, got to figure out why it's now I have to actually. So I can start it and shut it down, but I can't actually connect to it. And of course, that's going to take forever. So let's go and still see if we can't figure out why it's not working. Go and delete it. We'll go ahead and add a driver. There'd be client, the only one I want to add. And org.apache.derby clients. What did I want to call it? Nope. JDBC dot. I think I named that correctly. Okay. Org Apache. Of course, did I really misspell it again? No, right? That's spelled correctly. Yeah, so I don't know. We'll have to download the other one and see if that one works. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and figure out what's wrong, right? Obviously, and then I will get back to you. The short answer is I can Google a problem and fix it, or yeah, it should not be doing this though. This is ridiculous. I'm pretty annoyed. Let's go ahead and extract. Let me see. Back in NetBeans. NetBeans, are you being a tool? Libraries, we have the Derby client, we have that. They're both in there. What else am I missing here? Mm. 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 Nope. Not a plugin. All right, we're just gonna wait it out, I guess. So if you didn't know this, you can actually run Derby without you can actually run Derby completely without NetBeans, of course. But the problem is you don't get to use NetBeans tools. Let me show you a couple things real quick while we're doing it. We'll figure this out in a minute. I don't know why it's being stupid, but essentially you connect to it. This connection icon is going to actually look like it's not broken when it's connected. And then you can actually create a table using a tool if you choose to do so. We're going to use code most of the time, but you can create a table. By adding columns and so forth. And it's going to look like this when the table exists. You have table, and then you have the IDs and so forth. It has a SQL editor, so you can actually type things into the SQL command, SQL editor, to actually do things, and then you can see the results when you run it. And of course, you can insert things into the rows using NetBeans. Not actually, you can actually insert a query right into NetBeans to do it. And we'll be doing these things once we get what's called. And of course, you can delete things as so forth. One thing I'm going to recommend, though, is that you actually execute all of your command. You can test things using NetBeans, but make sure you actually run all your commands via code. And the reason for that is you're going to want me to be able to you're going to want me to actually you're going to want me to be able to use the same tables and so forth that you did. And as a result, I'm just going to copy this to documents. As a result, you're always going to want me to work with the same data that you have. So you're going to want to insert that data. You're going to want to do those things via code. Once you actually write the code, you can initialize the database at any point, which just makes your life a lot easier. All right, I have 15 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and cut it. I'm going to obviously keep trying to make it work. What I guess is going to happen is once I copied it in the same folder. That not the smartest thing I've done today. But what I was going to say is that what I'm guessing is going to happen, I have to do one thing, and I'm either getting stressed because I'm in front of a group of kids that are waiting for me to show them how to do it, and so I'm forgetting one step somewhere along the way. I don't think I am, but what the point is that I'll figure out what's wrong, I'll fix it, and then I'll record it so that you can see the fix. All right, so what happened last time, and I'm just going to do this. Is the version that we were using wasn't happy with the version we were using. Huh. Right. All right, that is going to piss me off. I will literally yell at someone if this just works. So what happens when you go to install it just the way I just did it? It actually looks through the folders, and then that's why the Java DB embedded in networkers are there, because it tries to connect. No, it's fine. I don't know why you would yell. You get yelled at. But like, I don't understand why you get yelled at, but I am like wanting to yell right now, but not at a specific student. However, it is starting. So usually it doesn't take this long to connect. I'm going to kill it. Let's go ahead and start the server. Huh. All right, so something else is going wrong. So something else is going wrong right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close NetBeans and reopen it. That kind of day, guys. But yeah, it's probably something really simple, but you can see if you install the right database thing, it shouldn't require any. Okay, so something's clearly still wrong. Something's clearly still wrong. So to say I'm annoyed is an understatement. Oh, I know what's part of what's wrong. Okay, so part of what's going on is yeah, I don't know if I want to remove. That's fine with me. Okay. So I think we have a couple of things going on at the wrong at the same time. And yeah, I think something I did. I don't know. I think something I did when I installed it is improper, and therefore it's not working. However, The bad news is I don't know how to kill it. Right? Like when I went and changed the database, it killed the sample. Or did it? Actually, you know what? Exit. Kill it all. There you go. And you can see there is no, yeah, there you go. Let's try to recreate it. Now I deleted that and restart it. All right, so I will tell you that usually this is not this difficult. Usually it's 5 seconds. So now I'm a little annoyed. No, has no impact on it, of course. All right, the other thing I was going to point out is that you can't actually remove the database. And you go, wait, what? Yeah, so I'm not happy this is happening. I have to figure out why it's actually going wrong. But I just want to point out while I'm here, you go here and you go register MySQL server. You can add a, where's MySQL server? I don't want to do that. Say a new connection. Say right, and then I don't know. Sample username. It's actually app. And then maybe you want to remember it, right? It has to actually start the database and it's not starting the database. But I guess my point was when you go here and you come here and then you go to change the properties, you can't undo the properties, right? You got to set it from one database to another. There's no way to undo it. What you're essentially stuck doing to get rid of it is, believe it or not, in my case, I'll just freaking do it because I'm really freaking annoyed at this point. You come along here, then you actually have to wipe out NetBeans. So yeah, that's what I get for doing it live, I guess. On one hand, you guys get to see it happen live. On the other hand, if something goes wrong, ta-da! I spent 20 minutes trying to figure out why it's not working. Now, good news is I already downloaded it, so it's still here, so I can still install it. I don't really need to reinstall the JDK. I'm just going to reinstall NetBeans. I know, right? Note, I don't do anything special. I just click next. It installs extra crap, but extra crap in this situation is totally fine. What do you mean other programs? Do you mean like what happens to your app folder? Like where like you created projects and stuff? That's not part of NetBeans. That's actually all stored in your document folder. So that doesn't change. Does that make sense? You can wipe NetBeans out without having to worry about losing any of your code that you've created. You just lose any configuration tools that you may, like if you configure NetBeans a certain way, I don't know, then you would lose that. One thing I did in fact lose on the last or prior to this class's installation is that I forgot how to make the code bigger. I don't believe I ever got the output code to run bigger, but I did get the code itself to run bigger, the code itself to show bigger. But yeah, you lose settings like that. In real life, I use the light mode in NetBeans because I use the light mode in NetBeans. I don't really even, I'm not 100% sure how to change it, to be honest with you. I mean, that's how bad it is. Because I'm always uninstalling it and reinstalling it. So I lose all those settings every time. So I don't bother to go learn how to use the settings again. But I would typically use a dark mode because it would be better on my eyes, essentially, if that makes sense. And so in this case, it actually reinstalled it with the same properties. So as you can see, actually uninstalling it, reinstall it didn't actually do it. So, right. And you're like, wait, what? Yeah, so that installation folder would actually remain. So I'm just going to remove it again. And now I'm going to go really wipe that sucker out. Well, I'm going to wait for it to actually uninstall. And then I'm going to go wipe it out. Brain fart. So a couple of places I'm going to check. Obviously not Zoom folders, but brain farting. So I'm going to go localhost. I'm going to go users. I'm going to go mruth, and I'm looking for anything to do with NetBeans. Nope. We see no NetBeans configuration, so we're good. So it's not a user thing, which is good. Just verifying. Okay, got a bunch of crap here though, unfortunately, but whatever, not my problem. Let's go check out public real quick as well. Not public. Oh yeah, we don't need to do that. All right, then we go look at program files, and I just want to make sure that Oracle is what I'm looking for. I think my dog just bit my kid, by the way. See NetBeans. Is there any good reason to have a NetBeans 12 folder? No. It's not in Java. All right, get rid of NetBeans and see. All right. In short, you got to make sure you really get rid of it. I think I got rid of it here. Let me double check here. No NetBeans, no what you call it. Trying to think where else it could be. What is homework runner? Oh, yeah, never mind. I think we're good. But you know what? Now we know we can do it. How to completely uninstall NetBeans 15. How do we get rid of it? Where are you at? So the configuration is not, yeah, see, local data, bastard. Roaming and local data. Burr, burr, burr. No, it's app data. That's what I'm looking for. Duh. All right. This is just how to get rid of it. We don't really, hopefully you'll never need to worry about this. There we go. Local. No. 75 85 megabytes. That's configuration crap. All right. And then it says it was also in here. Sure is. Bye-bye. And boom, 105 megabytes for a configuration, by the way. That's pretty bloated. But, oh, it keeps going. 5.54 gigabytes. What is it, running locally? Yeah, might be running locally. In other words, it tries to put the whole application in the folder. Now, seriously, okay, whatever. And go in here, back to downloads. And yes, this does suck, but yeah, what I'll do is I'll make sure it works. I think the 15 isn't working, so I'm going to try it, or 16 didn't work, so I'm going to try the 15. And then I will record a short 5-minute video showing you what I did to actually make it work. But yeah, you actually have to do a lot to get rid of it if you do it wrong. So very important that I do it right first. Yeah, like I said, I'll record a short video, or I'll just talk about it at the beginning of next class. It's going to make next class go a little bit more quickly. We'll still have time to do everything we need to do. We just won't be able to run as many examples. But we'll still be able to do almost everything. Well, yeah, we'll be able to do everything you need for the homework and then some, so shouldn't be that big of a deal. But yeah, that being is being stupid. I wish should have clicked don't check for updates, but hindsight is what they say is 2020. So anyway, what I was talking about with the app data is sometimes an application will actually put it in a separate folder, and then the application is actually running mostly in memory, and then the configuration is the application actually running, and so it just saves some of that stuff. So it's massive. It looks massively bloated, but it's really just like, I don't know, a memory dump of the actual application, which allows it to, if it has to load that application again, it can load it very, very, very rapidly to where you were, which is why when I opened it, you can see when I opened it earlier, it went right to the last folder, and that is not what I wanted to do. It should have reset it. It should look like this. So I'm not going to do anything with that. I'm going to actually go to services, click on database, and click on properties, and you should see it is in fact blank. I am actually going to let the recording run. So if you got to take off, take off. I'm going to let the recording run just because it's going to be easier for me to just, because I think I just fixed it. So I think this will just take a second. I just deleted it, and I'm going to create a new folder called Ruth DBs, just so that it's a different name. Click OK. All right. And I did not install any drivers or anything. As you can see, it's trying to start the database. Yeah, you guys too. No, I don't want to create a quiz. Yeah. Anyway, I'll fix it, figure it out. I'm actually going to stop the recording because it'll just be easier just to fix it without the recording. But anyway, y'all have a great day.